Sorry to told. When glory was wide, sing for Santa. Sony Chukwa. Shinji Kwata Inkwa. Sin Quad, Sin Quado. Sin Quadabum Sword. Trinquoda Bindos. Does roar Iguana. fingius mati quasta.
berasal dari karena berisi penomongan ini.
Ore quasa chega.
Siete effetti comuni. Ay, nasa. Rinnafansumi. Anane. Actually, memory. Rasa ari memory. Anapay.
Istoga hat wadafa. Ode uri iskora grata.
Arsuthia. Naru. Groshisu.
Take a moment to empower yourself on how to have a safer pregnancy with expert charity Mama Academy. From 16 to 24 weeks, you should feel your baby's movements increase. Movements then stay about the same until your baby is born. Babies should not move less towards the end of pregnancy or during labour. A reduction in your baby's movements could be nothing to worry about. But if your baby's movements are significantly less or stop, call your maternity unit straight away. No matter how many times this happens, you should be asked to go in for an assessment. Don't rely on home Dopplers, handheld monitors, or phone apps to check your baby's well-being. They don't give a true picture of your baby's health. During your third trimester, it is recommended that you go to sleep on your side. Research shows that this is safer for your baby. Don't worry if you wake up on your back. Simply settle back onto your side. Call your maternity unit immediately if you have any bleeding or leaking of fluid, clear or any colour, a high temperature, obvious swelling of your hands, face, or upper body, a persistent headache, problems with vision, blurring, flashing lights or spots, or difficulty focusing, severe pain just below the ribs in the middle of your tummy, itching on hands, feet, or anywhere else. Be confident and report your concerns. If in doubt, get checked out. If you are worried about any aspect of your care, ask to speak to your head of midwifery. You can find more information in our pregnancy passports. Ask your midwife for one or purchase one from our website for just £2. For more information, visit www.mamaacademy.org.uk.
Welcome so much, Catherine, to our podcast. I'm here with Marisa Kamel, and we're really looking forward to discussing your wealth of experience in the maternity realm. So tell us about yourself, Catherine, and what you're up to at the moment.
Right, okay. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on here, first of all, and to talk about being a midwife, mostly. So I've been a midwife since back in the 80s, so that's quite a long time. And I'm both a nurse and a midwife, but also much later on I did a master's degree in psychotherapy, so I'm a clinical psychotherapist too. I love midwifery. I love the work that I've done, and I suppose my career was always about being with women, and I always felt that was the most important thing for me, that women were happy, listened to, and advocated for. So those qualities were always what I put in my head in whatever I did. So I had a long career in the community, firstly, where I mostly did home births or domino births. And a domino birth is where you know your midwife in the community. She does your antenatal care for you. When you go into labour, she comes to see you, and she with you decides where's best for you to have your baby. And this is why lots of women chose to stay at home. But we had a very small GP unit, which had quite a nice setup for women like that to come in and give birth. And I was probably one of the first midwives there to do water births with them. So I'm talking way back in the late 80s, early 90s. And then after I'd trained as a clinical psychotherapist, it really made me passionate about wanting to listen to women, but also to help direct them into what can make a difference for them in their pregnancies and births. So I became a consultant midwife, one of the very first in the country, and that was at Leicester, and I helped set up a midwife-led unit there, and that was successful, still going today. And then after about 4 or 5 years, I was invited to take a job in Birmingham, central Birmingham, to a unit that was failing. And so I took the challenge on, and I developed and designed midwife-led services there, but particularly two birth centres, Serenity Birth Centre and Halcyon. And they were massively successful. In fact, we won several awards for those. And then in 2019, I retired clinically because I was appointed as the president of the Royal College of Midwives. And that tenure ended in 2022. And I am retired now, but I'm still teaching clinically. I'm associate professor of midwifery at a couple of universities. And I pretty much do what I enjoy, which is talking about midwifery and childbirth. And I've been all over the world to do that. So I've been very fortunate, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. So that's kind of a bit of a professional update.
I think, thank you. Just to interject there, first of all, we're honoured to have you on. You've got such a wealth of experience. But even with all that, I think you missed something. Don't you have 1 or 2 books?
Oh, I do. Yeah. So I was asked to write a book, first of all, because although I had all this knowledge and you just get on with it, I find women are pretty much like that, never having the time to put it all down. But I was asked to write a book on understanding anxiety. But I wanted it to be a bit more than that. So I wanted it to be anxiety, worry, but then probably the most severe end of that spectrum being fear. And at the time, I was doing a PhD into that area. And so basically, I wrote up quite a bit of what I knew, but also what I learned in doing some more research. So Springer published the book for me, and I asked a few other people to contribute. So that was helpful. And I've got a book with the publishers at the moment, just waiting to be birthed, if you like, which is around maternity care and survivors of sexual abuse. And this is an area I'm passionate about because it's not spoken about. And I've done a huge amount of teaching on this subject matter. And it's very, very important, I think, because it's so secretive, that we give it our time and support.
So what are the current challenges at the moment that you're finding out in the field in regards to fear and anxiety around pregnancy and childbirth?
I mean, there's an absolute, I suppose, drive now to understand the psychological elements of childbearing, not the psychiatric. This is a psychological. So these women are often unknown. They are just like me and you guys. They're having normal lives, but when they become pregnant, for some reason, the anxiety and the worry escalates. Now, some of that is maternity's fault. And this is what I found in my research, because I thought, well, women have access today to so much more information. So they should be, by that equation, they should be less worried. But no, that's part of the problem in a sense, because the internet gives us access to absolutely everything. But what I found when I interviewed obstetricians and interviewed midwives and independent midwives, because they're a group of clinicians who see almost exclusively these women, it's the structure of the information giving. So when a doctor talks to someone, they're time poor. They don't have half an hour to sit and talk to someone. So they give that information out very clinically, very much as it's written on NICE guidance or, professional guidance. And women don't always understand that. So an example would be, and this is way back in my career, I remember this happening, a woman was referred in to have a scan because they couldn't see all the parameters on the first scan. This was around about 22 weeks. So she was invited back. The clinician who did the scan couldn't visualize completely the left leg. So she told the woman, I can't see the left leg, and did everything else. And the woman was paralyzed with terror. So she came home straight to the surgery where she was registered, of where I was a midwife, and was incomprehensive, really, with her fear that her baby was being born without a leg. Now, when I rang and spoke to the sonographer, she told me that she couldn't do the measurements clearly on the left leg, but she didn't say that. And so these conversations are acted out countrywide, worldwide even, that we give so much information, but we don't step back and talk in a way that is compassionate, reassuring, and also reducing anxiety, because we could do that so easily, yet we don't. So those elements, I think, are really, really important. And it's something that our profession has to work on and has to have much more skill in doing the session with the woman or the appointment, but to be reassuring in nature, but still giving that information.
Absolutely. Language and context is just so important. We've actually got a page on our website about how to talk to women in the right context, because it's so important that women are given certain information to empower them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you say, not to cause any unnecessary fear or anxiety. But obviously I do appreciate that time constraints are a real issue at the moment, aren't they? But getting that language right is just paramount.
Yeah, it is. And I would often have students with me, or medical students, or in some cases visiting consultants from other countries. And it wasn't that I was showing them how to speak to women. What I was showing them was how not to harm women. And I think some of us are really, really good at this. And I know that psychotherapy taught me about the listening, but it also taught me about the speaking. And one of the issues around maternity today is it's an absolute cauldron of potential harm. And that's not because people in there want to hurt women, but it's because they are busy, they are understaffed, they're often underfunded, and the systems that are set up are not meeting the requirements of anyone, either clinician or women. And if we address that, then I think we would release an awful lot of potential and have much happier families at the end of it, but also staff that come to work. So I think the funders and the system directors have to look at their services and have to take responsibility for the harm that's being put into women's lives.
Yeah, because I guess even the kind of the most emotionally intelligent of people, with that kind of cauldron of what's going on, it's kind of up against you, isn't it? So it's a
Yeah,
constant, I guess, every conversation, a reset of how am I framing this? Have I listened?
yeah,
Have I responded in a way that's not going to be misunderstood? And
yeah.
the is the patient the right word at that stage? I would say client in my world,
No,
but
I would say woman, and I know that's controversial, but I've spent a lifetime saying that because I've cared for women.
yeah.
So yeah, it's controversial, but I still hold on to it.
No, I like that, and it also personifies the person, doesn't it?
Mm.
Okay. I'd like to just delve a little bit deeper on that. So we've spent quite a lot of time talking about the fear. What advice would you give to women to help overcome that fear?
Um, well, firstly, I think it's find an advocate. Now, that advocate might be her own midwife. It might be someone she connects with early in that pregnancy. The other thing I would say is seek that advocate early on because harm is cumulative and anxiety and worry and then becomes fear. That was why I wanted that spectrum to talk about because being anxious is normal to some degree in pregnancy and mothering. There's not one of us that can say that we had throughout our period of childbearing and then mothering, we've not had an anxious day or an anxious night because we have. And that's normal. That's because we need that so that we become more alert, more aware, more receptive. When it's worry, it then becomes ruminative. And what I mean by that is we focus on it more than we don't. So then we become more uh, almost like obsessed about that particular thing. So, for that example, that woman then was obsessed with every time she was sent for an examination or a test that she understood everything about it. And that's okay, but the harm was done. And this is why I think having an advocate early on might just take you off that ultimate pathway of being fearful for the whole of pregnancy and then birth. Because we know that constant stress and anxiety produces stress hormones, which, many years ago, researchers found had an impact on the baby developing, that it might not reach its target weight that it could have in pregnancy. So if we can do all we can to reduce that anxiety, then we have every chance of having, the baby that should be and the mother who can be a mother without all the trappings of worry. Because if we don't deal with it in pregnancy, it manifests itself afterwards in many, many ways. And some of those become psychiatric in the nature. And that is terrible. It's terrible that we should be seeing someone all the way through and then in 18 months following the birth of her baby, she's had to have, intensive psychiatric input. And we should be avoiding those situations by supporting women very early on. So advocates can be a doula, they can be a best friend even, but they can be someone that woman has confidence in, but also who knows that woman and knows what is right for her and can speak to her at times where she can't. So I've always pushed women to get someone with them who they can trust, even if that were me, and that I did a birthing plan with her and I was at the birth, even if I wasn't the lead clinician at the birth. So that's the biggest piece of advice I can give. I can also say, don't watch childbirth stuff on TV because it's highly edited. Try not to read your feeds on social media, because once you see something awful, then it just piles it through. And focus on a positive role model in some sense, where someone has had a birth like you want, and use that as the template for your birth. So that's the kind of advice. I also don't forget that this baby is part of a family. So I try to understand what that family dynamic is. If it is that the mother, and this is the research that I found too in my own PhD, if the mother was, her mother, I mean, overly anxious, never had another child, and she was aware as a little one growing up that her mother talked about the birth often, that is so detrimental in terms of how that child then becomes a young person, then becomes a potential mother. That can have a massive impact on her understanding of what birth is. So I like to understand the family dynamic, and that was something I did in my clinic. I did a family history, and I tried to pick out the birthing elements within that family as well.
That is so interesting. I'm just thinking of all the different scenarios now of when people can have fear of pregnancy. It could be that they've had a previous loss. It could be what you've just described, their family dynamics.
Yeah.
It could be that they've suffered birth trauma before, or it could just be that it's their first pregnancy and they're really scared of
Yeah.
giving in general. We launched a rainbow pregnancy helpline. And actually, we've just opened it up to midwives as well, because we, identify that they must be sort of very anxious during their pregnancy, because
Yeah.
they have all sorts of things that, all the different complications that can happen. But I'm just thinking, because we're probably going to open it up to everybody actually that's generally concerned and anxious during their pregnancy, to give that sort of extra counselling. But I'm just thinking, we haven't had any calls yet from dads and partners. So, and I think it's very, important that they get the right support as well.
Yeah.
And they also know how to support mum that's going through this fear and anxiety. What can they do to help support their partner?
So this I first really came across when I was doing my master's degree, and I set up a group. Well, I invited a group of women to come and talk about their birthing experiences. And there was one woman in that group who had become very, I won't say violent, but her nature had changed a lot since she'd given birth. And it was obvious she wasn't depressed, but she was angry, and she had become physical with her husband sometimes because he didn't understand what she was experiencing or had experienced during the birth. And I asked to meet up with him, and he and her hadn't really talked about the birth together. And this is one of the the complete kind of we miss out on this when we go in and do a postnatal visit. We often don't see a partner because the partner's busy, either sorting out the other children, doing the errands, having a nap because they've done a night feed. So we don't see them together. So one of the things I think that's important is for a midwife afterwards to see them together and to have that conversation. How are you? How are you? So it's they're part of the problem, but they can also be part of the solution. One of the other things, and this again, I probably relate back. I was one of the first people to talk about bystander trauma in maternity. Because if your partner's in labour, everything seems okay, and then all of a sudden, as happens, I don't know, the cord's presenting, and that woman is very quickly turned onto a front on all fours, whipped down to theatre, and he's just kind of sat in the chair. One of the things that's really important is someone to be with him. And we used to just all follow the bed and the woman into theatre. Part of the emergency drills training, and one of the things I introduced in ways of working was to have allocated people who were either going to be the midwife to get the baby in theatre, but also who's the midwife or who's the support worker who's with dad, who's there. And if that is addressed, then often their trauma is much lessened instead of them imagining what the hell is going on and will he have a wife or will he have a lost baby and his partner. So it's identifying it very, very early that they too can become traumatized by being in maternity settings and having an understanding about when things aren't going right, who's keeping an eye on him. And that's a case wherever the birth setting is, not just in hospital, whether it's at home. And so communicating with both people, I think, is the key. And that should be done in pregnancy, but also during the birth and beyond.
That thank you. That really resonates with me because I carry some birth trauma, but me and my husband, we didn't discuss it for like a few weeks until after the birth, and he actually was in the room for, I don't know, the long period whilst it was, happening for several hours. And then all of a sudden I had to have an emergency C-section. And he said it was like we were in control together, and then all of a sudden you're in a separate room and you're not allowed to come in whilst they sort the spinal block and everything else. But at that point you're just scared, and then he just remembers being like behind the door and not being allowed in, and there was just nobody there. So if that was implemented, that would have helped us.
You see, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I had my daughter in 1980, so we're talking long time ago. But right at the point where I was about to birth, and you too, by the sounds of it, your partner's taken away from you. Out they go. Why? And there's no reason why. There was no reason why he couldn't be in the room with you while you had your spinal. It's custom and practice. And this is the thing about maternity, what I talk about the system. The system has customized themselves to be highly medicalized. And when you are highly medicalized, it gives you authority, and your presence challenges that, and the partner's presence challenges that. I've asked anaesthetists many times, what is it that a partner can't see? And there's nothing. There is nothing that they do that your partner can't see. So this is about advocacy again, asking and challenging, because you've needed that support and you don't stop needing it because it's an emergency. You actually need it more. So I challenge all the time systems and services. Just because it's on the menu doesn't mean that's what you're going to eat. You want something off the menu, and that's what we should be thinking rather than, oh, we can't do that. Why?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about individuals being like feeling empowered, isn't it, as
Yeah.
well, rather than just go with kind of the precedent or what's been.
Yeah.
And something else that struck a chord actually was just, the discussions afterwards with me and my husband, because I suffered from postnatal depression, but
Yeah.
then equally the hormones is just a totally wild ride, and I don't think emotionally I was capable of really discussing with him what had happened.
No.
And now I look back with kind of light and fondness, but it's taken time. But I guess Heidi as well, that's where the rainbow line would come in as well.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking about women that might not have a partner
Mm.
that was able to support them in the first place,
Yeah.
or so they might be on their own, or perhaps women who have a partner but they're not very supportive. And I
Supportive. Yeah. Yeah.
women who've experienced sexual abuse as well, and the
Yeah.
fear that they go through giving birth, it must be so much harder for them as well.
It is. It's something, again, I'm really passionate about this because um, personally, it's something I've experienced right from a child, and the connections to how it manifested within me, I didn't learn about really until I became a psychotherapist. And then everything made sense. It's a little bit like it in life, you kind of get on with life, but it always felt slightly out of kilter. But once I started to understand what this did to me and that part of me that I can't see, then I felt like all the bits clicked into place. It's something